we'll go to public comment in just a minute. I don't know if anybody's here for public comment or they're more anxious to hear about our agenda items. But please come to the table, state your name and the question you might have for us this evening if it's not something already listed on the agenda. I know some of you are interested in the superintendent's contract update, and I can tell you that as of tonight, there is no final resolution regarding his contract. The negotiations are active and ongoing, and that we hope to have a decision. We are optimistic for a solution and anticipate having additional updates at our next March meeting. And so thank you for the time. We will be meeting in executive sessions to finish that negotiation. Tonight we will be discussing budget for the most part. I know we have the PAC update as well. But I wanted to share with people who might have missed the Select Board FinCom meeting before vacation, to thank Gloria in particular for setting the stage and making the way for us to have a very successful evening that night. Ingrid's going to bring us up to speed on that in just a minute after our reports. But the FinCom and the Select Board voted unanimously to transfer some money to us for current fiscal year to help with some of our shortfalls. So as I said, Ingrid's going to do that. Keep in mind, I do believe that still needs town meeting approval. So it's not completely done yet. As we said, this whole budget process is a process, and we have to get to March 28th. Okay. So I will start with reports. Superintendent.
We want to welcome our students, staff, and families back. Hope everyone, as you said, Avery, had a wonderful vacation. It's hard to believe that we're already approaching March with only several months remaining to the school year. It has been a very good school year. Just a reminder that next week on March 3rd, Tuesday, there will be no classes, there will be no school because it's election day, and for school security purposes, if you recall, we built that into this year's calendar, so there will be no school next Tuesday. Also want to congratulate our middle school junior grade ghosts. Attended a hockey game last night. It started about 8:45, I think, and it was well played. It was a tough game. The Westford junior grade ghosts middle school team played a combination Linfield Peabody team. They were an exceptionally strong team. Unfortunately lost, but conducted themselves like all of our athletes and students do in a commendable way. And so it was a great game. We congratulate them for their second place finish.
I guess I jumped ahead. I should let the microphone be opened after my if somebody has a comment that they'd like that's not on the agenda, please feel free to come forward. If not, we will continue with our reports. I think she's making her way.
Hi, I'm Susan Higgins, 9 Sherwood Drive, and I have a question for the board.
Absolutely.
Megan, you resigned. Why are you sitting on the board today?
Sue, we're going to use respectful tone in this room tonight. I don't feel that was completely respectful. So Megan has a statement that she will read in just a minute.
Thank you for your question.
Okay, no other public comment? Then we'll jump to Carrie. Sorry about the jump over.
Okay, on March 23rd, Chrissy Bold and I are going to be providing you with some updates on the guided math that's taking place this year in middle school. As you may recall, we trained the math staff last school year at the middle school, and as a result, this year's 6th grade, we dismantled the accelerated and standard math program and provided math instruction for heterogeneous groups, and that has been working very well. So I look forward to sharing more details on March 23rd about this. I think the teachers are receiving it well, students also, and one of the changes, though, that we had to consider is for our 7th grade students who will be moving into 8th grade, because we don't currently or won't end up having in 7th grade an accelerated versus standard. We had to adjust the way that we look at students entering 8th grade for those who are taking the Algebra 1, which was previously called accelerated math in 8th grade versus the 8th grade math. So we've got some exciting, actually, new processes in place, and one of which I think that we're most proud of is because there needs to be a composite score from 7th grade moving to 8th grade of, it happens to be 85, we are going to take a look at a lower score for students who are on the cusp. They will be able to determine with their families, students and families can have a conversation and determine whether or not, even though they fell a little bit short of the 85, they may still choose to enter Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And that's something that really embraces challenge success. Challenge success, we don't want just new rules and restrictions placed on people. We really want to empower students and parents to make healthy choices for themselves. And this is one additional step in that direction. So more on that in March. We also, as the superintendent noted, have March 3rd as a professional development day. We are supercharging our learning on Super Tuesday. And the themes of the day will be very similar to what we've had going throughout the year. The grades K-5 classroom teachers will be, who have been working on the new social studies standards, they will be participating in training called A Classroom of Difference, which is going to be presented by a member of the Anti-Defamation League. And the purpose of this is to try to eliminate bias from teaching, from conversations, and actually, more than eliminating it, acknowledge our own biases so that we can properly navigate some of the content that may be more sensitive in nature with these new standards. So it's promoting respect, inclusiveness, and civility. And then the other part of the day, because so much of our social studies curriculum is technology oriented as well, so we want to provide the elementary some additional Google training, technology training, and that will be conducted by Julie Boudreau as well as the curriculum coordinators at the elementary level. So that'll be a hopefully very useful day for the elementaries. The non-classroom teachers at the elementary level, as well as all 6 through 12 staff, will be seeing Pete Hall again. He was back in October and now is returning for session 2 on creating trauma-sensitive school environments. And then there'll be time for reflection, discussion, questions, and processing after or before his presentation, because there are 2 sessions there. And then the history and social studies teachers at the 6 through 12 level will continue working on their curriculum development and developing IDMs, which are inquiry design models, and those are ways to absorb the new social studies skills and content in a way that fosters curiosity, inquiry, and discovery. So we're thrilled about that. And lastly, we have recently our French exchange group of 12 students who went to Normandy returned, and the superintendent and I got some wonderful pictures from that group. They participated in a wreath-laying ceremony at an American cemetery where many soldiers lost their lives during the D-Day landings. So it was a special moment for them, and as always, a very enriching trip for the students and the staff alike.
May I just say that speaks, as you know, we've talked before about the amount of time that teachers and professionals in our school system spend beyond the contracted workday. There is an extraordinary amount of time and energy expended to arrange the trip, to conduct the trip, to get everyone there safely and back home safely, so everyone's accounted for. And I think that those are the things that most people don't realize over the course of the school year, that there are many, many, many hours put in beyond the contracted workday to benefit particular students, but also in trips like this, these are our ambassadors, our cultural ambassadors, global ambassadors that really represent Westford and represent our state and represent our country very well. And those pictures were just magnificent that were sent back. And so we're very proud of everyone, and not only on the French students trip, but all of the trips that take place during the course of the year.
12 of our high school students, did you say?
That's right.
Great. Great opportunity. Subcommittee liaison reports.
Just a quick update from the CPAC. Over several meetings and through communicating with the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the director of student services, the CPAC membership came up with a letter that we shared with the leadership of all of the boards in town, with our SACs, with our excuse me, our select board, with the FinCom, with to try to sort of address some of the questions that have come up as far as special education funding is concerned, and some of the concerning language that we had heard. And together with the district, the CPAC put together a statement, and I won't read it here tonight. It was actually read at a joint meeting of the FinCom, the Select Board, and the School Committee a couple weeks ago. But I will ask that it be added to our packet. I should have emailed that. But I do want to just read this one paragraph to you. We hereby request that you, as a Westford community leader, join us in our mission to eradicate the use of any inflammatory or accusatory language directed to our students with special needs. We ask that you share this document with your organization, as a public commitment to our mission and shared responsibility to the equitable education of all of our students, regardless of disability, race, color, religion, national origin, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, marital status, military status, homelessness, disability, pregnancy or parenting status, athletic or academic achievement, or proficiency in the English language. And the CPAC membership did work very hard on this, and I am very grateful to both the members and to the district for working with us on this. And again, I will forward it so that it can be included with the packet for tonight.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well
Good work.
Quick policy update.
Yes.
We have a trio of policies that all needed to be added to our school committee policies based on the Every Student Succeeds Act. So there are a trio of policies that address policies and procedures pertaining to students who may be experiencing homelessness, students who might be in foster care, or students who are children of military families. So all three of those policies have been reviewed, thank you Alicia, and drafted by the policy subcommittee, and they're currently under leadership review. When we hear back from leadership with their feedback, then we hope to bring those trio of policies before the full school committee soon. We've also had a request from our Director of School Finance about updating a policy regarding how we dispose of obsolete school equipment. And if we're going to look at updating that policy to allow for potential obtaining of credit. So if we do have obsolete material equipment, for example, old computers, if those can be turned into a vendor at a cost savings, we want to make sure we update our policy to permit such a credit and yield some cost savings for our schools. So we will obviously be looking at that policy in the very near future, and then we hope to send it on to leadership and then bring it towards the committee.
That one will be very helpful because there are specific regulations that pertain to the disposition of public property, and one of the things that the town does not have in its policy that we need to, or correct me if I'm wrong, if the town has it in their policy, Ingrid, in terms of accepting a credit for trade-in of items.
No, because, so the school committee has some policies, they're
P3407.
they could use some updating just in general, but we could always piggyback on the town policies, but the town doesn't have a policy that, they have a disposal policy, but not that allows credits.
Correct.
So the advice we got was to add something to ours, and this could maybe be a mini step towards redoing the whole policy eventually. But Gail Ansometti and I worked with Mike Wells on this, and we really took the template language from the MASC templates, so everyone felt comfortable.
Awesome.
Yeah. No negative impact to students, but a big financial impact
Right,
to the town.
so we could turn the
And
old
environmental.
equipment in
That's correct.
and get credits for new equipment.
And be green when recycling.
Exactly.
Thanks, Christopher.
Any, Sean, do you have any?
No.
Okay. You feeling better?
I am, thank you.
We're not keeping you, you don't have to stay at the end of the table, but. Yeah, go ahead.
So many of you watching and in the room are probably surprised to see me tonight, so I did prepare a brief statement if the committee will indulge me reading it. During the February 10th school committee meeting, I made a decision and an announcement in that moment that was in the best interest of my own mental and emotional well-being. Since that meeting, I've taken time with my family, in fact out of state, for a week, to reflect on the events of that evening. I feel it is my obligation to fulfill my 3-year term to its end as a school committee member, a member of the policy subcommittee, and for the last 2 years as a member of the capital planning committee. Thank you for your understanding during this time.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to Ingrid, 2020? So Ingrid's, oh, student, I looked right at you too.
Sorry. I just wanted to say good luck to the WA students competing in various events in the next couple of weeks. I believe that Nordic Ski has their state race tomorrow. DECA states are this week. Mock trial has states this weekend, and then basketball and hockey have playoffs starting this week. And then, yeah, a lot. Yeah. And then I also wanted to share a petition that was started by a fellow student council member to hopefully get you guys to reconsider renewing Mr. Olson's contract. It currently has 1,232 signatures, and it's still being signed as I speak.
Okay.
So it's going
Is it
out.
something you can send to us?
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
be happy to email it to anyone who
Perfect.
wants it.
That would be great. And basketball and hockey?
I think I might have missed stuff, but
And I know swimming,
Oh yeah, swim. I think swim had theirs.
they're all
Yeah.
done. There you are.
State championship girls again.
Okay.
Nice job.
Swimming.
Pardon?
Swim and dive.
Swim and dive, excuse me, in sixth place with boys. Yes, swim
Awesome.
and dive, yes.
And how about basketball? Is it both men
Boys
and?
and girls basketball this week, boys and girls ice hockey this week, and as she stated, Nordic ski and so forth. So busy week, we're on every
So
night.
will the basketball again be traveling out to Worcester when I had to follow them all over the place? Okay.
29, 27 when I left at half. For the boys.
Okay, okay, knock on wood quickly. Okay, very good, thank you. We'll be anxious to hear all of those updates.
So I did just want
I'm
to
gonna
stick
move.
in one quick update on the finance
Yep.
side. Just, we did receive a draft, and we're going to be working through it this week from the Massachusetts Association of People Transportation. So we had, they are doing an analysis of our special education transportation for us. And so we are going to work through that and provide them with some feedback and look forward to the final draft to present to you at a future meeting. But we're close, and I think
That's great.
we'll really benefit from some of their recommendations.
So FY '20,
All right.
explain to us what happened. Oh, you need a,
Okay, I need a clicker.
am I in the way? Should I go?
No, I think it's high enough.
Is it?
Sorry,
I'm okay?
I think you all have had this in your packet, so
Yes.
you don't have to
I
contort.
don't have to turn around.
All right, so just for school committee, this is the same presentation that we did share with at the select board and finance committee the other week, but just for the public here and in your meeting. So this year, as I will elaborate a little more in the first and second quarter report, our special ed tuitions are much higher than we had budgeted for. And then in conjunction with that, we received less credits from the Valley Collaborative, $140,000 less. So it is putting more pressure on the circuit breaker, because that's really the only thing that we have to, extra funds to pay for these increased tuitions. So thanks to a lot of work I know from Gloria and the superintendent and everyone to get to discuss with the finance committee and the select board and the town manager the possibility of having a supplemental appropriation for FY20 to take some of the pressure off the circuit breaker and allow us to then carry over more circuit breaker funds to FY21. So right now our tuition variance is $474,229. That was actually 2 weeks ago, and I have not updated it. I'm hoping that over the vacation break it didn't change a whole lot. Let's see. All right. Okay. So this is just a quick graph that shows what the $400,000 supplemental request will do to the budget. As you will see, the first, or that middle column, the FY20 actual shows it without the 400,000, and then the far right column has it with the 400,000. And if you look down and you see where the red circle, $448,068, that would be the amount of current year circuit breaker we would need if we got the supplemental, which is, as Avery had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that will be a vote at town meeting. It's one of the financial articles, so among other financial or supplemental requests from other town departments. Without that 400,000, we would need approximately, as we know, subject to change as we get closer and closer to the year end and the actual tuition bills all come in, $884,068 of current year circuit breaker. As you all know, the FY20 circuit breaker funds, in an ideal world, we could carry over all of those. They would not need to be spent in FY20. We could carry them to 21. So really the goal is to not spend as many FY20 circuit breaker funds as possible, and that will then offset, or that will give us more funds basically next year for special education tuitions and other expenses. Sorry, I'm having clicker challenges. This is pretty much just another one of my arrow graphs that shows how by adding that 400,000 this year, it helps next year, giving more circuit breaker funds to be offset the tuitions in FY21. Oops. So that was the supplemental, and Blair.
But before we skip
Yes,
ahead to FY21, you thanked some people. I would like to thank you for answering all of my questions about special education tuitions and circuit breaker, which we ask you frequently. It is very complicated and it takes time to understand, and your assistance greatly appreciated in understanding what our difficulties were in FY20 and how that was putting pressure not only on the FY20 budget, but also on our FY21 budget. Also, of course, thank you to FinCom and the Board of Selectmen for unanimously supporting a recommendation to make this appropriation. As Avery said at the beginning, this is an appropriation that does need final approval at town meeting, so we would certainly encourage people to attend town meeting and support this appropriation. It will greatly help the school budget, not only in this budget year, but also in next year. So we very much appreciate support for this departmental transfer of funds to supplement our special education tuitions in FY20.
And I just wanted to add one more thing, just if people wonder where this money comes from. So, as we work through the year and the town realizes how much free cash we'll have left over based on closeouts and what's received from the state, we get our free cash certified, and these funds would come out of the FY20 free cash.
Hey, we may just make a note again to underscore that this is essentially a one-time supplemental appropriation. Does not become part of our base for rolling over into following fiscal years. But what it does do, once again, is it frees up circuit breaker funds that will allow us to put less stress on the general fund appropriation in fiscal 2021, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Do you want to skip ahead to that and wait on the additional chapter 70 so
It's up to
people
you.
can,
Yep.
does anybody else have questions on 20? Okay. Does it make sense to everybody to keep going with this line and skip over the chapter 70? So,
I'm having clicking issues there. Okay.
no, one more.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
All right, good. I wasn't sure it'd stop.
Okay.
So this is really recapping again, what it does, which is, by not having to spend the circuit breaker funds in FY20, it allows us to have an additional $400,000 to spend, or to fund special education tuitions out of circuit breaker in FY21. And then the suggested allocation then of those funds to supplement the 21 budget is to reserve $110,000 in school choice, which is what we had to add on to in our original budget presentation, the superintendent's recommendation to balance things, that we had to pull more out of circuit breaker in order not to make further reductions. There's a recommendation for one full-time equivalent elementary adjustment counselor at grades 3 through 5. Currently, Abbott already has a 0.5, and the idea would be that there would be a 0.5 adjustment counselor at Crisafulli and a 0.5 at Day. So there would be equity there, and start really addressing some of those needs that have been identified in our schools, particularly at the elementary level. And then $230,000 in the special education reserve fund, or stabilization or reserve, I'm sorry.
Actually, yeah.
It's a reserve. And this is a fund that the school committee would have to vote to accept the money to be put in, and then for the money to be spent, it would require another school committee vote and a vote of the Board of Selectmen. And that money can only be used for special education.
May I just make a follow-up comment? There might be a propensity for some people to say, well, with the $400,000 supplemental appropriation in the current fiscal year, that therefore frees up an equal amount, $400,000 of circuit breaker, okay, against next year's general fund budget. Why don't we use that money that is now a little bit more freed up in fiscal 21 to hire back some of the staff? And that's probably the most dangerous thing we could do, because please keep in mind that we averaged over about a 15-year period about a 3.43% annual increase from the town. In the last 2 fiscal years, it's been 1.6, 1.9, and now for next year, 2.4. Still an appropriation increase, but when you compare that to the 3.43% average over a prolonged period of time, that's why we're in the difficult fiscal position we're in. It doesn't mean the town is not trying to fund us. It's just that we're one of many departments with a number of priorities that the town is facing. The reason we did decide to bring back, or not bring back, excuse me, hire an adjustment council that would be split between 2 of the 3 through 5 schools, in addition to the 0.5 that we already have, is because in my budget meetings with the staff of every school, going back now about 3 to 4 months ago, the overwhelming comment at the elementary level from the staff was, Bill, how do we begin to address, and when do we begin to address the behavioral issues of students and the broader scope of mental health issues with children either externally manifesting some behavior or internally withdrawing, which is equally as concerning, if not more so. We, just on the heels of the report from Health Maintenance Associates, also making some recommendations on how we can improve our services. And so we felt that it was vitally important to make sure that every child, or as many children as possible, that we can reach with additional adjustment counselors split between 2 buildings, will help students be more ready to learn during the day. I can't tell you how important that has been to the teachers. The principals over the last 8 years in budget meetings have consistently said, when posed with the question, what is the most important emerging need? It's stress and anxiety and behavioral issues in children. Issues of cutting in children that are in K-2 grades and 3 through 5 grades. And so we need to do a more comprehensive job, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. But that's why I chose to, instead of bringing back services that were reduced over the last couple of years, we need to sometimes readjust our priorities to address those current and emerging needs that are really, really presenting a challenge to the classroom teachers. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understand why I opted for an additional adjustment counselor, keeping in mind, once again, that will give us 0.5 at every one of the grade 3 through 5 schools. See? So thank you for
And if I
letting me explain
remember
that.
correctly, that was a recommendation of HMA, as you said.
That's correct.
And these half-time people will hopefully be available for those crisis students, not necessarily tied up in IEP needs and classroom teaching,
That's
and
correct.
they're really going to be hands-on and helping the most critical.
Triaging in real time.
Yes. Any question? Yep.
Bill, can I just ask you to speak to the adding the 1.0, so 0.5 at Crisafulli and 0.5 a day? We didn't have that at those 2 schools before.
That's correct.
Can you just speak to that a little bit of why there was one at Abbott? Was it to meet a certain population of students? Was it because there were more students there?
Yes, there were, over the last, I want to say 5 years, there have been a greater number of students exhibiting behavioral issues than at either the day or the Crisafulli, but those numbers at both the day and the Crisafulli are beginning to rise now. So it was trying to address a specific need at the time.
Okay, which also addresses something we're always striving for, which is just equity, that at
That's
any of
correct.
these schools, students can access the same services
Mhm.
needed, which is good.
And to comment on the Special Education Reserve Stabilization Fund, that is really setting us up for a better place as we move ahead, is
Yeah.
to put it in that fund
That's right.
so that we have that
And
reserve.
that fund can carry over multiple years, but it really was, a fund that was set up, by the state for communities to adapt to be that really saving rainy day of fund.
And that has been our goal, to fund that
Yes.
as much as we
Right.
can.
That's right. The importance there is that we've always talked about stability, going from one year to the next, stability in programs, services, and staffing. And we need to do as much as we can to leverage our financial position and therefore the services to children from one year to the next. And we can't look at it finitely in any one particular year without understanding the impact in future years.
Any other questions for this one-time supplement that we covered in 20 and 21, before we jump back to Chapter 70, which is FY '21?
Right.
A lot of moving parts, I'm sorry, Ingrid.
No. So when the governor's budget was released, Westford did receive increased Chapter 70 funds, which are the state funds going towards the school system. The Chapter 70 increased about 141,000, and then there were some offsets as well, and so once all that was shook out, the town felt that 137,250 could be allocated to our FY '21 budget. So those are new funds that we have available, and the superintendent's recommendation is to fund to use those funds for 2 elementary teachers. Initially, the budget had 6 elementary teachers reduced due to enrollment. Upon further analysis of the enrollment projections, particularly at grade 1, it really was starting to show some pressure points. So the recommendation is to keep 2 elementary teachers at the K through 2 level. Well, actually, the K through 5 level. And, you know, as we get further in the year, see where really the biggest pressure point is. As we know, we have families moving into Westford every day. We had 2 families in my office this morning registering, so actually both at the elementary level as well. So it's always fluid. And then the other is the additional remaining 29,250 is for extra hours for the specialists. If we have more sections, then certain specialists may need extra hours here and there, so that would cover that.
I just wanted to add some clarifications for people who may have been following this for a long period of time. These funds are a direct result of the passage of the Student Opportunity Act at the Massachusetts State Legislature, and that was kind of the final name of what had originally been the Promise Act. So all of the advocacy that's taken place over the last year by community members, by teachers here in Westford and across the state really did ultimately come to fruition, and these funds are a result of that. So thank you to all the people who supported the Promise Act and who went out and advocated on behalf of Westford students and students across the state, and thank you to our state legislatures, Jim Arciero and Ed Kennedy, both who were supporters of the Promise Act and this additional funding. I guess the other part of the story to add is I guess it was about a month ago at this point, we had just come to the realization that we had these funds, but we weren't really sure how or even if we were going to be able to utilize them to kind of adjust what had originally been proposed in the superintendent's original proposed budget from December 11th. And we had some kind of even confusion on the committee of could we take votes, could we do anything with these funds, because there was such concern and such pressure on the FY20 budget, which was causing pressure on the FY21. Mm-hmm. So that's how all of these Jenga pieces have kind of fit together, and the assistance that we received and the support we received from FinCom and Board of Selectmen in the FY20 budget has really given us the flexibility to feel like now we were able to go back to leadership and say, now that we have a little more give in that FY21 budget, what would be the best adjustments to make? And these are the adjustments that came out of that. So in that original budget, there was a proposed reduction of 6 elementary classroom teachers. With adding these 2 back in, now that proposed budget would only be reducing 4 elementary classroom teachers, not 6. And then there, because we'd have extra sections, there's also an adjustment for all of the specialist hours for those sections. Did I get that right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Megan?
Awesome.
So I just wanted to add on, I'm glad that you said, Ingrid, what I was going to explain for people watching is that just because we're adding in 2, which schools and what grades those are in won't necessarily reflect the data that we were looking at when we thought 4 made more sense than 6, because those numbers are so fluid, and so the superintendent will have to determine where the need is to adjust to appropriate class sizes as we get closer. Right. A question about the teacher specialist hours. How does that tie into the reductions proposed in the budget to music and PE?
I'm gonna, Mary.
Well, currently for music and PE, for music and art, they have 2 different FTE counts. Art is able to cover all classes throughout elementary currently, so even if we reduce only 3 or 4 sections, then we know that they will still continue to be able to do that because it's still less than what they're doing now. Music, we now have shaved that back to match art because they have the same number of classes that they have to teach as the art teachers. There's the preschool component that we have in music right now, And we do believe with the scheduling, we'll be able to continue offering that. But that said, depending on how, and music already travels. So I don't expect that needing to be adjusted. What we will look at is the PE teacher, and if maybe instead of reducing by a 1.0, we reduce by a 0.8, depending on the number of sections. And PE is a little bit different, unlike music and art, because while they have the same number of sections throughout elementary for PE, they also teach health. So there's an added class that they teach. So that's why all 3 specialists, the numbers can't match from music to art to PE. So we'll just take a look at the schedules and be sure. I mean, we don't want to cram them so tight that they're bursting at the seams and racing and scoffing down their lunch to get to the next school. And we don't have that now either. But to continue to avoid that reduction of a 1.0 PE teacher might be only a 0.8.
Do we know, is one of the sheets I don't have, I was looking to see if I had it handy, how much is the reduction of the 1.0 PE teacher? Do we know, estimated, like?
54,000 is the number
Okay.
we use, yep.
Okay. Because right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. You're proposing a 4.8 for next year, and you're saying that might change a little bit, that we need a full 5.0?
Potentially.
Potentially, so that this last person
That's right.
would have 2 more sections.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we jump? I know, so, did you have a question?
Well, I was wondering, I don't know when the appropriate time to ask this in terms of how we're making votes and if
I have some
there are any
notes and plans.
motions or adjustments that
Yes.
people may want to suggest or discuss, so.
If there are motions to adjust, now, thank you, Ingrid. We have spent a lot of time, I wouldn't go very far.
Oh, okay. I didn't think so,
We're
but.
probably gonna need to.
We have taken a lot of time to look through all of the budget proposals. If we look back at the superintendent's, originally we ran through it and we being school committee had said, we're more comfortable with 4, not 6 teachers, and that is now indeed what we're looking at. PE is still something that we're gonna be looking at as far as sections, but the rest of that, I think, holds on the staff adjustments due to the enrollment changes.
Avery, just a quick
Yep.
question. Those 4, Bill, we're still anticipating those 4 will be realized through 4 planned retirements already?
We're hoping so.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that is.
What's interesting is, for this current fiscal year, most of the retirements were at grades 6 through 12.
Okay.
Next year, a number of them are at the elementary level.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So those are 4 staff members that may be retiring that wouldn't necessarily be replaced, so this might require some
movement.
teachers
Yes.
to
That's
move,
correct.
you know,
Okay. But
between
hopefully
grades or between
less riffing
buildings.
Right.
But
the goal.
We're hoping to locate
Excellent.
all of those who are subject to a reduction in force into a position.
Okay. The other piece, which also may require some shuffle, is that there was a middle school language teacher that was indicated. The initial proposal was for Latin, and I think it was fairly clear from the committee that we were not in support of Latin and that we would be looking to reduce the extra Spanish teacher at the Stony Brook. And I think we all realize that could require movement of teachers.
That's right.
To make sure that the right staffing is at the right schools,
Based on licensure.
based on
Right.
licensure.
that was one of my questions is I also feel like, although we didn't officially take a vote on this piece.
We're about to.
But,
Yeah.
but I felt like it was a priority for me and the committee to make sure that we are servicing all of our current 7th graders, that all of those 7th graders are able to continue with their language of choice into 8th grade. And while we may have solved a problem in saying that we would like to maintain Latin, so those Latin students won't have to switch, we may have created a problem for Spanish, because we know we have a large number of Spanish students currently in 7th grade at Stony Brook. And so to allow those students to continue in Spanish, I didn't know if it would be helpful for the committee to make a motion in support of an additional 0.2 FTE Spanish teacher that could allow a part-time Spanish teacher to come in to assist to cover that increase that population of 8th grade Spanish students, and if that is something that would be helpful to administration in
Yeah, I'd like
kind
the
of fixing
administration to
that.
be able to have that bandwidth to make the correct decision if they need us to vote an extra Spanish teacher to cover that.
I'm not sure where we would get the additional .2 from the budget unless we have to reduce it from somewhere else.
And there are a couple of options that we could work with in terms of current staffing, looking at licensure, as well as thinking creatively of the curriculum coordinator as well, to be able to cover those current Stony Brook 7th grade students moving into 8th grade. So we would not be recommending a .2
Very good.
FTE and
I
would still be
Rather
able to
piece it
cover
together
those.
like that, yeah,
I
'cause-
feel it's in their genre, not necessarily ours, to dictate how those
And the
those
reality
things
of
are.
trying to find a .2
Yeah.
foreign language teacher is very difficult. So we'll try to piece it together.
But you think you have a solution for those?
Yes, we've got options for solutions, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, though.
Appreciate that.
So I think those are the two big things, is that the 4, not 6, and the world language teacher, we would ask that it's Spanish and keep all languages intact as they stand currently. Any other amendments to those kind of, that we had? Yes?
Sorry, had one other. It is what is seemingly monetarily a minor request, but programmatically, I think it's something we had an extensive discussion with. We received a lot of communication from the public on, and I would like for the committee to revisit the foreign exchange coordinator stipend.
I don't think that's on this list. I think it's on a coming list.
Well, it's in our budget somewhere.
Okay,
So I'm
well,
not
I was
sure.
trying to do
It's
it
not on-
group by
I kn-
group,
I know
but-
it's not on this
Yep.
list, but in fairness, it might cause an adjustment on this in school choice. So
Okay.
since we're talking about, because I'm not sure where else that adjustment might come from.
Sure.
My concern about it, and yeah, sorry if I'm bringing up out of order and if it fits
Yeah,
someplace
no, I was
else.
trying to follow some order of what we needed to approve, so.
But I'll throw it out now and you address
Yep.
it where it makes sense. But my concern is historically our foreign exchange program has not had a monetary component to it. It has not been done with a for-profit group. It uses a different visa type, and that program has served us well for a long period of time. One of the proposed changes is to eliminate the stipend from our budget and to potentially have the stipend for the foreign exchange coordinator paid for by an outside for-profit group, which really does change our whole system for how we have foreign exchange students in our community. I don't know that that is a decision we want to make, or that I don't know if that's a decision that it makes sense to be making as part of a budgetary process instead of a different discussion that kind of focuses on that. Also, this stipend is dictated as part of the Unit A collective bargaining agreement, and that contract is currently under review. So I think if there were going to be any adjustments made to it, it's better done in that realm. So since that was
Can
something
we give Carrie a chance to
that had been
answer
raised,
those
yeah,
questions?
yeah. So I was just wondering if that could be removed from the budget, and I guess that would require a minor adjustment to the school choice. But that was
Well,
something I wanted the.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe just from a financial perspective, I think we want to just, and I know it's only a small amount of money, but I would suggest that we get together also to talk about are there some potential clubs and organizations that we don't want to run that will allow us to reallocate that money instead of adding money back in. We just reallocate some of the money that we have.
Right, that's what I was gonna suggest,
And
just
handle
through
it
the
through Unit
student
A.
activity fees.
That's correct.
Looking at, how many, and that could be part of, what you normally do next fall
Yeah.
when you review the stipends.
Because it's all within the same Unit A schedule for stipends.
Right.
It's just that maybe we don't run some activities and just reappropriate those funds to that particular activity.
Okay, as long as it'll be addressed somewhere at some point, I just wanted to make sure. I know there was extensive public comment. We got a lot of just number of
Yes.
heartfelt emails
Absolutely.
on this topic from students
And
who
we
had
want that
participated in it.
homey feel to it still.
Exactly.
Because I know we had the option of the other program.
Right,
The-
yeah, Educatious is
That's
a
the one.
program that other districts have used and have found to be very successful. I know Jim and the superintendent and Tim Welch have been meeting, and they did speak with Educatious as well as people from Groton Dunstable in particular who had rave reviews about it. I think the concern, as you sort of mentioned from Tim Welch, was that if the host families were getting paid, might they be doing it, some of them may be doing it for the wrong reasons versus, in the current system that we have, they're doing it truly for the experience because they are not getting paid. We did have a partnership with Cambridge Institute, which is similar to Educatious previously for many years, and we did invite exchange students or cultural students in for a full year with host families being paid, and that was actually running simultaneously with the Tim Welch program, and we found that to be very successful. We didn't find that there were issues with having host families and having them there for the right reasons, and it was also very helpful, especially in times like this where we were being reimbursed for the cost to educate the students, because they would be paying, their families would be paying the school through Educatious for the resources that are allocated to educate them for the year. So we felt as though in these times that made the most sense to maintain those types of experiences for our students and for other students from different countries. But if it is the will of the committee to find it from a different source, then we can do that as well.
I think one of the benefits of that, Gloria, in terms of our reallocating monies, is that sometimes with travel bans in various countries or travel concerns, we might not have any students, or only one student, and so taking the money and reallocating it from activities that we may choose not to run and devoting it to that, will at least give us that stability of funding instead of being uncertain from year to year if we're going to have any students or not for international travel.
No need to make any final decisions on it tonight. I just, since it had come up during the budget process, I definitely wanted to raise it. And if we'd be making a final decision on that at a later time after we have more information about all the various programs, completely fine by me. We don't necessarily need a motion tonight on it, I guess.
No, I don't think it was part of
but-
the larger, I think they had sort of moved it to the side because of the issues that you brought up. Okay, so one of the big ones in the reorganization is the AP SSL merging of their positions. And a few meetings ago, we did see a job description, a joint job description. And so I think we were looking for the committee's approval of that job description so we can go ahead and start making those plans. So I guess I do need a motion to approve the AP SSL job description.
I have a question.
Yes,
I'm trying to
find it.
find the job description. There was a concern that was raised by members of the CPAC that there's a specific kind of certification called a special education administrator certification, and that was not included in the job description. And there were a lot of parents that did relay to me some concerns that if we're creating this joint role, that while we want them to have administrative certification, there's the other very complicated special education portion of it. So I wonder if you could speak to why the job description does not include a requirement for that certification, and if that's something going forward that as part of PD or whatever the other programs that Courtney was telling us, Courtney has a plan, Courtney Moran has a plan for professional development and certification going forward. Is that something that will eventually be part of the job description? Why was it not part of it to begin with then? And yes, sorry.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it's something that we grappled with for many meetings. We have currently 6 people in place who are terrific administrators. So we were working within the current 6 staff. We did feel, though, that as long as they had that license to be an administrator, whether it be an assistant principal or special education director, that either of those would provide at least, again, the administration piece that would be necessary for being an assistant principal. Unlike a new hire, if we have a new position coming from outside of the district where we expect them to have all of these skills and experiences, we do have a plan in place that's very much concentrated on given the proper training to the individuals based on their individual needs. So not even just kind of a blanket series of trainings for the assistant principals, but even within the assistant principals, they have varying experiences and backgrounds. So we are committed to providing the appropriate training so that whether this year they have one license or the other, the reality is that they will have all of the information and all of the support needed to know to do the job effectively. And each of the 6 individuals who are involved are so enthusiastic about this and kind of chomping at the bit to get started. And we will be, as I mentioned in a previous meeting, getting started this school year so that we have a lot of background information as we begin next school year. And then, of course, it will continue, and at that point, it will be kind of real-time experience that we're building on.
Yeah, a lot of the, just to pick up on that, we talked extensively to the assistant principals that they're very intimately involved in understanding the developmental needs of our students, as you know. And so this is where Courtney's specific training will really pay great dividends for them. And one of the people involved who happens to live in southern New Hampshire has indicated that a number of school systems, particularly for budget-cutting reasons, have combined these 2 positions very successfully. And so that was one of the pieces of information that we wanted to understand before we went too far with this model. But we're absolutely convinced it'll work extremely well. And the real benefit is getting to know the students. If you talk with all of the people who split their time between schools, whether it's teachers or principals, they'll all say we would love to be able to get the know the kids better. So that training that Courtney has planned is going to be excellent.
So I did just find the date. It's for anyone who's interested in going back to watch the video. Director Moran gave a fantastic presentation, and she answered 43 plus of our questions. That's the February 3rd meeting was when her presentation was, and if you go back to the document manager, you can see her PDF of her slides are in there as well. And I have to say, for me, it also spoke very highly of the process that one of our principals, Sharon Kennelly from Crisafulli, came forward and was very much in support of this plan. And I think going forward, if we do it right, this is a huge opportunity to have equity at a level that we have never had before. And I think, I applaud Director Moran's efforts here. I think it's anything the CPAC can do to help, let us know.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. It's really going to improve the level of services to our students.
Okay, question?
I just had 2 quick questions. First, are you asking that we approve this at the same time as the preschool moving, because they were sort of woven together in the presentation on the 3rd?
I think we've covered a lot of that with questions. This is a specific motion that the administration feels they need on the job description.
Of the job description.
Yeah.
Correct.
And please understand that
Okay.
the preschool moving is an administrative decision.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I mean, do you have a question on the preschool?
No.
Or no?
Nope.
Okay.
I was just looking back at the presentation and seeing
Yes,
that
and
was
I
sort
have
of
that.
part of it, and so I was asking that. But I do have a question in terms of this role. So once this role is sort of up and running and we consider these people properly trained to do this effectively, I assume there's also changes being done to their evaluation systems that would reflect the roles needed by
That's correct.
both of these things?
Yep.
Okay.
The evaluation system is based on whatever a person's job responsibilities are.
Okay.
And the extent to which they complete them satisfactorily, exemplary, or not so.
Okay, thank you.
Right, so can I get a motion to approve that job description?
Sure. Motion to approve the job description for the combined assistant principal student support leader position.
Second.
All in favor? It's a unanimous vote.
Thank you.
So we've got that one. And the last one that we wanted to cover and get a specific vote on, because it does impact quite a bit, are the proposed fees. I think Ingrid handed out to everybody a list of our fees and our proposed increases. I can read them for the record, so
Can put 'em on the
you can put them on the screen. And so I think, again, we've discussed a lot of these. If there are any last comments, then we just need to officially vote these in as fees so that Ingrid can go ahead.
Oh, well.
Well, I'll turn our head sideways.
There you go.
Do you want a motion before the discussion?
Sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the fees as proposed for FY '21.
Second.
Any discussion on the fees? Go ahead.
I just feel like I have to speak on behalf of the students. I know it
She
may,
can speak
it may
too.
sound, well, no, and for all students who may be asked to pay the fee, I know $200 a year seems like a reasonable fee, and there's been research, and it shows that we're benchmarked in comparison to other school systems that charge a similar parking fee. But it's just such a big jump from the current fee of $50, which has kind of been in place for a really long time. And often, you know, students are in the position of maybe paying that fee on their own. Parents will say, sure, you can have a car, but you need to pay for your gas, or you need to pay for your parking fee, or you need to help pay for your insurance. And so especially since that fee falls on students often, just the large jump, just
It is a large jump.
that one just troubles me. And I know there are jumps in others, and I feel badly that we really ever have to increase any fee, but I also understand the financial necessity for it. But since that one falls on students, I guess that's the one that's most troubling to me.
And to counter that, Gloria, just because I think it's good to see all sides. I
Yeah.
thought we had such a fruitful discussion that night. I thought Jim had some great points about that fee increasing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think you felt comfortable in this and felt that maybe it's unfortunate that 50 stayed 50 for so long, because it wouldn't be such a big jump if 50 had increased, but that was in part because we didn't
12
know
years,
what
yeah.
the fee could go
Right.
to support.
Right.
So that's sort of unfortunate circumstance, but I think the 50 kind of lagged way behind. We talked a little bit, like somebody from the audience just said, it's cheaper than the bus fee. Perhaps it will encourage carpooling. We're short on spots as it is. So there are some issues that I think come in conjunction with this, but I felt after that conversation and after hearing from Principal Antonelli, I felt comfortable with it, so.
All excellent points. All
I mean,
excellent
the
points.
other
I'll
big
take
jump
them.
is the early arrival. I mean, that was the best thing when my children were that age.
Best bargain in
That
town.
was the best thing going, and I hate to see it increase, but it is, you know, we are in, you know, current climate that mandates that we have to review every bit of things, including the fees,
And
unfortunately.
keep in mind, particularly for the early arrival, you know, staff, minimum wage, all those
Right, that's right.
pressures, so
Impact that.
the costs are increasing,
Mhm.
so.
I suppose it also is worth clarifying, so for example, that WA parking fee is only going to be used for things that would,
Facility use.
that would support, say, the
Support that.
plowing of the lots and
Correct.
things. Where all these fees go directly to the thing that the fee is connected to. So
Correct,
the
the
bus fees
offsets.
go towards
Towards-
only
correct.
bus
Yes.
fees. The
Purpose for
parking
which it was
fees go
intended.
towards parking lot maintenance. The early arrival only goes to that
Sure.
program. So I think that is worth clarifying for the public, like, those fees aren't being used to support, you know, science
No, it's
equipment
all
or
very-
something. It's only
Yeah.
for that,
All revolving.
it's only to help offset those
But
costs.
the parking lot did get expanded, so
That's
you
right.
can
That's
get the
correct.
bounds of
It
what
gives
that can be used for
facilities.
now.
It can be used for facility use, so, within the Westford Academy
Complex.
larger complex.
Or also to offset the cost of the traffic
Right, the traffic,
guard.
guard,
who helps.
it already pays for, you know, the tags,
Right, striping,
But,
pavement,
but, you know, there's a
repairs,
lot of
all that.
administrative, costs involved in administering the parking as well, including the deans out there directing traffic as well, so.
I have seen that.
So that fee hasn't been increased since 2008.
I think the one thing that I would ask is just if we do approve these, that we collect data from this year and next year on all of the participation levels with all of these. I'd like to understand particularly the impact of things, as we talked about last time, whether it's a convenience privilege or something that's accessing, you know, a music program or something like that. I think it's really important to look at those numbers. And if we see a drop-off that really is impacting a student experience, it might cause a rethink of some of these. So I think it's really important that we look at it that way as well.
And I know on a school-by-school basis, I mean, when there's a true hardship, there
Right.
are accommodations.
We do evaluate that every year, and
Yep.
if you'd like to see that specific data, we'll certainly be glad to present that to you.
I think particularly the bus ridership though, with changing again,
Yes,
we
we have-
looked at that when we went up.
We have that multi-ridership
Yep.
data.
So I just want to repeat what Ingrid said a second ago, because it does give me pause, like Gloria said, the fee increase on the students themselves. And I know that there are a lot of students who drive to school because they have to work. So if there is a hardship, as Principal Antonelli said that night, if there is a hardship, please let someone know. There are ways that you can be helped, and you know, we can help mitigate some of those costs for students who truly need it.
Or spread them out over time.
Yes.
Right.
Any other questions or concerns on the fees? Because I want to just vote on fees so that that gets approved. And I believe I have a motion and a second. So all in favor of the proposed fees? Unanimous. Okay. And I think those were the big items that we needed to specifically call out, make sure that the administration understood where we were, and take a couple votes on the budget. We had already voted the budget, the bottom line. Those numbers, as we've been going, have changed this year's and next year's, but
Do we need
do you want us to revote the numbers?
as amended,
Ingrid?
since we now have the additional Chapter 70 money and
Well, that
the
we
additional-
did
Well, that
vote-
you already
we
voted
voted
on?
that on.
You voted
Okay.
on the additional
Well,
chapter
but we
70?
didn't vote how to spend it.
And how,
That it was in, but we
No,
didn't
but
vote,
that's-
we
I'm
didn't
not-
vote
I'm not
what
sure
the,
that
what the
we-
adjustments would be.
we have to vote the bottom line.
Okay.
And we did vote
400,000, we would just have school committee
the
recommends in the
137
warrant.
and the stormwater.
You don't want to vote
Okay.
that yet.
Oh, okay.
So,
I mean-
so what you're saying is we should wait until after town meeting to
To
vote this
allocate.
new allocated
Correct.
after we receive the
Bill,
money?
I'll defer to you, but I would say that would be the appropriate
Right.
because it hasn't been
We haven't
approved.
gotten the,
Okay.
Yeah, any
Right.
vote we'd have to take tonight would have to be kind of contingent on
Town meeting.
approval
We might
at
as
town
well.
meeting.
That's
the
right.
first April meeting, the only April meeting,
That's right.
I believe.
I would say
We
that,
will-
I would say so. It's pretty clear that we support this and that we,
Well,
you know,
So
Hope
it's a very
that-
responsible way to
yes.
spend the money.
And I hope, I'm very grateful for all the conversations that have been had about the circuit breaker and about student choice. And I hope that going forward, as we start talking about a finance subcommittee and things like that, that we do start looking at partnering with the town to better understand what are our encumbered costs versus our unencumbered costs and the things that shift, so that we can have these conversations earlier in the year so that we're not sort of behind schedule trying to catch up, and hopefully we don't get ourselves into a position like this again.
Yep.
So
Definitely.
We're on a good path, I
we
think.
are on a good path.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Okay,
Thanks.
we'll turn over the controls and then you can have them back. All right, we are going to do some old business in the 5th grade PAC update. And I'm gonna move aside again, yes. Because I do feel like I'm hiding my. Sure, come on up. Sorry about that.
Joe Mazzella, 9 Douglas Road.
Hello, Joe.
How you doing?
What questions do you have for us tonight?
The 137,
Mm-hmm.
is that 1 year? Or is that going to, is it a 1-year funding?
It is, okay, you wanna
Just
go
say,
ahead? It's in a, yeah.
That is part of the Chapter 70 appropriation, Joe, and we don't necessarily anticipate that that same amount will be received from year to year, because everything is subject to appropriation at the state level. But the Student Opportunity Act should provide us with a small amount of money, I would say somewhat consistent with this amount from year to year over the next 7 or 8 years. What's not going to happen in a community like Westford is we won't see $500,000, $750,000, $1.5 million. That's all going and I had a meeting with the Commissioner of Education with some other superintendents about 2 months ago. A preponderance of the money is going to go to the urban areas that have, much greater needs and more complex needs, and so it's going to be relatively small. So that act will provide some help, particularly if there's a partial reimbursement of special education transportation. But in terms of the base Chapter 70 aid, we can't expect an extraordinary windfall.
Are you asking if this becomes part of our foundation for next year?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I thought
I'm
you were
sorry.
asking.
I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to know whether
So I
this
guess
is part of the base carrying forward.
So
Yes.
if we work the 137 into this year's
It
appropriation,
automatically,
it brings your 2.4 up to what?
Well, keep in mind, that's going to be worked into the fiscal 21
Yep.
budget, right? So that will be
Right.
about
We don't
2.58,
have-
somewhere around there.
whatever the total
Yeah,
Chapter
it'd be
70, it
somewhere around
would change.
2.58.
And then that would be potentially the base that we would look at for next year, for the following 22.
I was at that meeting, and it's amazing how much fighting you needed to do to get 137. And I'm not sure if you hung around for the rest of the meeting, but to hear that the town was increasing their capital spend, so their 5-year capital spend went from $50 million to $65 million. So in 1 year, capital went up 30%. So what we expect to spend in capital goes up 30% in a 5-year plan. So it's really difficult when, I look to the school committee, and I know we've been going at it pretty hard here about advocating for the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get like a 0.3, maybe, and based on what the governor gives you, the governor fund gives you, and they're going up 30% on capital, and we're told there's no other place to find money, that's a difficult thing for me to figure out. Right? So
Sorry, I just want to point out as part of the capital planning committee, so capital also supports our schools. So some of the largest funded projects that contribute to our school systems are funded through capital.
if you look at some of the line items, just one line item was the town hall, which started off at $4 million and is close to $9 million, right? In 1 year. So that there's no way that I can really believe that, there's only one building in this community that goes up almost double.
Are you talking about Town Hall or the new town building?
It hasn't passed yet, so it has to pass at town meeting. I understand, but.
Neither has the 400,000 or the 130,
Yep.
a lot of things
Right.
haven't passed.
Right, I understand,
And where I'm
absolutely.
getting to is, in the last town meeting, we had one parent who, with a lot of, courage, went up there and almost got the school $300,000 for 1 year, right?
Correct.
And we said no to it, right? The school committee said, no, I don't
I
want that $300,000.
remember, it was a painful moment.
Right? And that was for 1 year. That could have probably helped you with some of the pressure that you're now borrowing $400,000 for. Right?
Okay.
So there's just some things that just don't, that doesn't work out in my head, right? When a town is willing to spend that kind of money and actually put it up as a town budget, but won't budge on a 2.4, maybe move it to a 2.6, and we're feeling good about that, and if it does get voted down, let's see the town gets around this and says, can't spend that money, $8 million on more infrastructure in this town when we can't pay for substitute teachers for schools, right? We vote that down, and some of that money happens to shift its way or say, well, what will we do with that money? I hope that this committee grabs it and doesn't leave it on the table the way they left it on the table last year.
Okay, so last year, I do remember, it was Erica who got up and asked, and the one-time funding, we are very cautious about in how we apply it to our budget, because it's not going to solve all of our problems in paying for teachers and ongoing expenses. So
But you're borrowing $400 this year.
we're not borrowing $400. We've been allocated $400,000 for very specific one-time uses.
But I guess when my son tells me that he has to go to the cafeteria because we can't afford a substitute teacher, and we leave $300,000 on a table, I kind of, certainly have questions about that.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons, I know it feels like we left that money on the table. That was a discussion among the committee, and there was a recommendation from administration to not accept that one-time fund and allocate all of it to salaries that we would only necessarily be able to pay for a year. And then what do we do with the salaries at when those funds go away? And so there was that concern. There was also the concern at the time that we made this decision at town meeting last year, there was huge uncertainty as to what was going to happen with our enrollment. The Hanover properties hadn't come online yet, other properties in town hadn't come online yet, and there was a lot of concern that we might have an emergency need for staffing over the summer. And if we did have such an emergency need for staffing, we had already spoken with FinCom and with Board of Selectmen. They were backing us up, and they were going to be our backstop, that if we needed an extra fourth grade teacher, or if we needed an extra second grade teacher, that they were going to be able to help us with that. By using those one-time funds and spending them in advance, we might have been sacrificing that potential backstop that we might have needed. It turned out we didn't need that backstop. We didn't have a huge influx of students from those apartments, but I think that was a very fiscally conservative recommendation.
You certainly needed some substitute teachers.
Do you want to address the substitute?
Yep, I'll let the
question?
administration discuss.
First of all, let me address the fiscal sense. Joe, I think for years and years and years, even when the person who made that amendment at town meeting last year was on the school committee, it's been the position that we don't go to town meeting and cannibalize other departments' budgets, because the town manager is charged with the responsibility of bringing a balanced budget forward. Those conversations need to start much, much earlier, which we've all been committed to, because it's too late when it gets to town meeting. What you want to look at also is over a period of time, if you look at the pie charts that have been in the Finance Committee books, the percentage of our operating budget with respect to the town's operating budget has dropped from about 50.4% to about 48 for fiscal 21 in the town manager's budget presentation, about 48.6 or 7%. Now you take a $100 million budget, that's $2 million difference. And so, yes, we need to advocate more. It has to happen far, far, far before we get to town meeting. And I think the town officials have heard from the comments of the multiple of people who have showed up that we need to take a look and begin to reprioritize funding for the school department. Look, I know that police and fire, public safety, highway, and everything else, the library is extraordinarily important. But when I see our percentage of the town budget dropping by almost 2% on a $100 million budget, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So I'll leave you with one thing. I've heard a few times like a subcommittee for budget mentioned.
Yes.
And maybe it's time for that, because
that is in our plans for next year.
I think this team here is good at figuring out like what our students need and curriculum and all those things, but when it comes to fighting for budget, maybe that's just not one of your strengths, right?
I would argue otherwise, since we just secured $400,000. But are you talking? Our subcommittee would just be part of our committee. It's not a committee of the community.
That's the question. Like, maybe it should be considered. Maybe some people that have more, like I would assume you have a certain passion for education, and maybe we need a committee that looks more towards that's stronger financially. Because I just think that you're now kind of caught up in like curriculum conversations, but I think we've talked about we need more time. But I can tell you, since we've been doing this for months, and if the answer always from the town is going to be no, you can start it in you can start 2022's budget today. It's always going to be no. I'm not sure how fruitful it is.
Can I clarify some capital planning stuff, since I think I do have a good grasp of some of the numbers after sitting there for 2 years? So $1.385 million is the amount of actual money that exists in the town budget that is being presented to town meeting as capital expenditures for this year. So the town hall building that you're talking about is not only not approved, but it would be bonded. You can't bond teacher salary money.
I understand
So
that,
1.3
too.
million. Of the 1.3 million, almost 750,000 is going to the schools. Computers, WA generator replacement,
No,
Robinson School tennis court repair, Stony Brook School generator control repair, Blanchard School flashing signage. So nearly half of it is
Yeah.
going to the schools. So just as a point of clarification for anyone
but when you're-
watching that doesn't
yeah,
understand.
But when you see, I was in that meeting last week, they said it went from 4 to 9.
Right.
Bonded, but every time we talk about these things as if, like, the town has a limited amount of revenue. I hear it pretty much all the time from the board, right?
Correct.
We have a limited revenue, but we're either spending it or borrowing it, right? Well, basically, we're directing money or we're borrowing money. And if we're borrowing all that money, if we feel good about borrowing all that money for a building, but then we won't give any money to schools.
But that's what town meeting is going to determine, is whether the town feels good about bonding money to build the building.
And the picture is much bigger than that. Like, we're about to pay off Westford Academy. I mean, we've still been borrowing money all this time to build Westford Academy, which has been here for now.
How many years? Thank you.
And we haven't paid off that, I believe this year, somebody out there can correct me, right? Is
This
when the
year it's
debt falls
falling
off.
off.
So I think that, I appreciate your comments, but I think it is bigger than the 7 of us. We are here for a
Certainly
purpose
can be
for this,
bigger
but there's.
than the 7 of you. I guess, I'm looking at 2.4 to 2.6, and I do you feel that's a successful
Percentage?
budget negotiation?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a.
And I'm really not expecting you to answer that.
Joe, I
I'm
think.
just saying
may I
that
just say-
ultimately, we gotta do better, right? And saying that we have to start these negotiations earlier, doesn't seem like it mattered much. We started, months ago. We didn't move it very much at all.
I think a lot of the discussions take place behind the scenes with the chairperson of the school committee, the board of selectmen, town manager, finance director, Ingrid and Kerry and myself, and we're committed to starting earlier and really getting back to an appropriation that will allow us to reasonably sustain the services, because that stability from year to year, if you talk to any staff member in the school system, we haven't been involved in that sawtooth effect where we're adding and cutting. We've been a steady progression, and the staff has really noticed that, and the students have also. So that's what we're going to get back, absolutely committed to, and quite honestly, have more meetings, many more meetings if we need to, with the town manager and the finance committee and the board of selectmen to get back to the more towards the average of annual increases that we've had over 15, 16 years.
I'm not quite sure how you're gonna get there.
I think we've done
Keeps
a lot of.
borrowing for all these other infrastructure things. I'm not sure how you ever get back to 3.4.
Fair, no,
Yep.
nope, we're just gonna let that one, thank you.
Can I ask one question just for clarification?
Sure, come on up.
Alright, so, I know you guys miss me. So Janelle Chaffee, 19 Phillips Drive. So I have a question. There was an article that was recently posted, and I really have no idea what it means, so I'm sure you guys.
Which article?
So I'm looking for education. Patch.com posted something about Westford Public Schools could receive $17.3 million next year based on the new governor's formula.
That's probably chapter 70. That's chapter 70.
It is, yeah, it's chapter
right.
70.
It could
and-
be, but Ingrid's shaking her head. It's all subject to.
You know what? I'm asking because it's better if we hear it from,
Absolutely.
for the public more so than just
All of that, that's part of the act that they were talking about, and Ingrid keeps a very close eye on it, and some of it could be special education. It's a combination, but it's
That's the full amount of chapter 70.
chapter
It is.
70.
Right. I think there was some, just,
So the
discrepancy
main-
in the article.
Yes, there is. So the main, just so you guys can address it here and not
Yep.
later. The main piece was under the preliminary budget, Westford would have to increase their pure pupil spending by $348, including a $30 increase in state funding for Westford to get the additional funds next year.
So it's a little backwards. So the way the chapter 70 calculation works. So There's something called hold harmless, so if our enrollment goes down, then, you know, we don't
Right.
automatically start losing money. And that's, so we get the same amount as we got last year, and then the legislation funded $30 per student extra that we get, so.
So I just wanted to address it, so. it
Thank
didn't
you
look
very
like
much.
that
So wait, before you go
questions were
anywhere,
asked.
there's a process that the state has put forward where districts need to communicate about the increase from the new Student Opportunity Act, and I know we have a deadline coming up, I think it's April 1st, that districts need to communicate with the state about their plan for going forward, so I know we will be talking about that very soon, so I would stay tuned.
It's all new for
It's all
everybody.
brand new, and it is
No,
all
I
subject
know,
to
but
appropriation,
It
so.
was brought up, and so I.
And then the always the bottom line is subject to funding. So if the state doesn't get their funds,
Yeah.
then
Right.
we may not get all of ours.
Just thought I'd ask.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Questions, other questions? Before we jump over to PAC.
Packed.
Packed. Sorry, forgot the T.
Okay. Ready to roll?
Yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna get out of your way again, because I still think I'm blocking the screen.
Well, we are back again for another update on the 5th grade culmination week that previously was 5th grade camp held at East Boston Camps for all 5th grade students in June. And as we went over in depth at previous meetings, there was reason to begin to rethink that week and shift to a new model that embraced our district's vision. Anytime there's opportunity for change, there's opportunity to rethink, reprioritize, and that's exactly what we had done. The original intent of shifting this week from camp to packed, which I'll get into in just a second, initial discussions around this particular year started in June, did go over the summer, and we thought we would have things buttoned up by September. And we had done an initial proposal of the week and how those revisions would look for students. And there was a lot of community comment and some community pushback around some of those particular days, 2 in particular. So one of the days, it was originally seeing some sort of movie around social emotional learning, and then have teachable moments, activities after the fact with students. There was parent concern saying, you know, movies, technology, going from the outdoor camp setting to that just didn't sit well with people. So while we then went back to take a look at other opportunities, we then brought another one forward, and again, keeping with the theme of social emotional learning, we thought an escape room would be a cool idea for students to have to work together in teams and problem solve and have patience and cooperation. And that too didn't quite sit well with the community. Mainly the concerns were the long bus ride to Malden, as well as it being indoors. So there are obviously multiple avenues that we could take to accomplish our sort of redefined vision. And so after hearing from the community again, we did go back to the drawing board. So I want to take you through where we are and what we plan to move forward with our 5th graders this spring and May. So PACT stands for Patience, Acceptance, Cooperation, and Teamwork. And we really wanted to take that week and focus all activities on these 4 areas which fall under the umbrella of social emotional learning. We think that these are certainly prominent in terms of our district vision, as well as skills when explicitly taught that can be carried forward to those years of middle school. So we were excited about kind of redefining what the goal was, and with any sort of redefining of a curriculum, a program, it does come with a loss. And that's, I think, what a lot of people had experienced, were experiencing when kind of wrapping their minds around a shift from what has been a long-standing tradition of 5th grade camp. So after the last meeting, back in probably December, we ended up bringing a committee together, and the goal was to determine what that third day would look like that was proposed as Bodeborg. And again, because of some of the comments that came from the community, we thought that it would be best that while we felt it did fall within the PACT theme, maybe not within the context of Westford and what Westford values. So we wanted to, again, revisit. This was clearly an iterative process to begin to mesh what our vision is with what makes sense for Westford and what we value here. So we do have those other 3 that had been mentioned, Adventure In and Out, that's at Nara Park in Acton, Project Adventure at East Boston Camps, and then that 4th day is the Move Up Day and talent shows, but it was that 3rd day where we were looking to revisit. So that was our goal since we last met formally. Oh, here we go.
We all need to get up.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened to the font there. So what did we do? We established a committee, and that consisted of myself as the assistant superintendent. We put it out there for any of the 5th grade teachers to join, and 2 volunteered to do that. 1 was a classroom teacher and 1 was a special education teacher. We had 2 curriculum coordinators, 3 parents, and 3 principals who were involved in these series of meetings on this committee. So when we got together, we identified what our mission is, and it was to evaluate and recommend a day 3 alternative that, this was a non-negotiable, remains grounded in the social emotional learning, or SEL, theme of PACT, that acronym. Something that's closer to home. While not a requirement to meet the PACT, it was something that clearly the community valued, as well as the community valuing the outdoor activities. So the 3rd one says potentially include outdoor activities. And then the 4th one was the 2nd non-negotiable, that it has to be fun and engaging for our 5th graders. We want them to have that sort of memorable excitement that they do about what we once had with zip lining and the ropes course. So we wanted to make sure that even though it is different, that it's equally as fun. So again, going back to that 3rd day, we began exploring different options and brainstorming different options. And it was actually a really cool mix of committee members, because everybody came with different. Oh, good thing I have this tapered in, because you'd know the answer. Okay, so what we did, we brainstormed various ideas that met that certain criteria. And people had some really wonderful suggestions from either something that they experienced or something that they had researched. And it was great to see that we were able, I think in all of the suggestions, we were able to fall within those 4 criteria, the non-negotiables, as well as being closer to home and potentially including outdoor activities. So the ideas were great, and then we had to figure out how we were going to narrow those down to 1. And so we developed scoring criteria and used a rubric. And then administered a Google form to everybody on the committee, which is basically a survey, to score each of those different ideas. And they scored, how fun is it? Is the location great? Is it outdoors? Is it PACT related? And then we compiled the committee's responses, and we also administered the same survey to all 5th grade teachers. And one of the great things about this was that the teachers who, all of the 5th grade teachers, not just the 2 on the committee, the data, their results mirrored the results of the committee, and it's wonderful when that happens. So we actually ended up both groups selecting the top choice. And we gained consensus on our recommendation because, of course, people brought forward on the committee their different ideas, and maybe somebody wanted their own idea more than the one that the points showed. But what we said was, we're going to gain consensus in terms of, do we all agree with the process, and did the process lend itself to fairly come up with what this third day should look like. And if you can get behind the process, even if there's another one you wanted more, then you'd be able to support that. So then we took a vote and unanimously were able to gain consensus. So the winner is outdoor pactivities. And so this third day, instead of Bodeborg, we are going to have outdoor pactivities, which is a collection of homemade activities that foster patience, acceptance, cooperation, and teamwork. We had several of the 5th grade previous camp activities that did just that. Many did not. So we are looking to take some of the activities that did foster that at camp, and that were also very popular. We know that some activities throughout camp students thought were more exciting than others, so we are obviously going to consider what was most exciting and fall within the pact. And then also, we will have that day located at East Boston camps. So it's kind of like a version, offshoot of what camp was, but still meets the vision, yet it addresses the desire that was so clear from the community feedback that we received. So here's what this week would look like at a glance. This is not anything new, except where it says outdoor pactivities. That particular label wasn't there until now, until this committee came to its decision. So at the Abbott School, for example, on that first day, they would go to Adventures In and Out at Nara Park in Acton. Then the following day, they would do outdoor pactivities at East Boston Camps. And then on the third day, back to East Boston Camps, which we did bring that in back in November or December as well. So there would be 2 days at East Boston Camps. And then day school would have those 3 days, the same 3, but just in a different rotation. And then the Chrissa Fully School would have, again, those 3 activities in the 3rd rotation. And then that 4th day would be the move-up day, where the Stony Brook students who will be going off to Stony head over there. And then the students, the 5th grade students who will be going to Blanchard, will be bused there, and that's where they will do the move-up day with the principals, who always put a lot of thought to make that day exciting and friendly and warm for our their incoming 6th graders. And then one of the hits at the end of camp week was the talent show, so we kept that. Last year, the talent show returned to the individual buildings, but this year we're going to have, while the students are at Stony Brook or Blanchard, then the talent show will be held at that school with all the peers that will be going to that school with them next year. So we're very excited about this. We think that it does bridge nicely with the feedback that we received, along with kind of our redefined vision of what we are really looking to gain out of that week for our students as they enter off or into middle school.
Very good.
Okay. Very good. Are there questions? If you have a question, feel free to come up. I'm just going to move my chair back so that you can.
Hi, Ursula Kane, Colonial Drive. So can you explain what some of these activities are going to actually be versus what's happening on the Project Adventure?
Sure. Yes. So Project Adventure and Adventure In and Out are outside organizations who sort of do this stuff for a living. Project Adventure we are bringing in, and they come up with a series of activities that foster patience, teamwork, taking risks, and they start at the beginning of the day with sort of a whole group icebreaker, and then they move on into smaller groups, so they have different counselors for each group and go through a series of activities. And the activities start as small as, they gave an example, like one of the earlier activities is knee tag, where the students in their small group have to play tag, and you have to touch somebody's knee to get them out. And when they start, it's that students can cover their knees and then they can't go out. And then it progresses over time, and during that time where the students just block their knees, what they're going to stop and find out and reflect on with their counselor as a facilitator is that there's no risk there. You can't get out, your knees are covered, but on the flip side, you can't really play. You're sort of just stuck walking around, you can't tag somebody else out, and then they start measuring sort of what it feels like when, okay, what if you do take a little more risk? Don't just block the knees and try to tag others, get involved with others. Then they add some restrictions. Okay, you can only block your knees 3 times in this whole 2 minutes, 3 minutes of this particular session. So they increase the risk and then reflect on what that feels like. When it's very low risk, what's good about that and what's an issue with that, and then moving on to the high risk. So it's really taking student-friendly activities that are fun for students and having a very purposeful kind of objective to help them be able to see. There's another activity where they have a large circle, and different items within the circle, they might be stepping stones, and they have 3 teams around a circle, and the goal is to get your team over to the other side first, but because of the different restrictions and rules they put in place little at a time, it becomes increasingly more difficult. So you have to use your communication skills to strategize. You need to be patient. You need to understand what your strengths are and what might be difficult for you and work around those. So it's a very explicit and purposeful adventure. In and Out. They foster social emotional learning. That's part of their marketing, and they often go to Narra Park because their organization is far away. And it's for districts that use them around here, they tend to do Narra Park, and where it was so close right in Acton, we said we'll just do that because they know that property well. And that is, there's a life-size kind of board game, so to speak, where students are in small groups and have to navigate through this game with different challenges along the way, all fostering teamwork and having to communicate. And then they have sort of a GPS scavenger hunt around the property as well in small groups, and they've got to think critically and really collaborate well to navigate from one sort of riddle and clue to the next. Lastly, outdoor activities, that is TBD, to be determined, because we are actually getting a group of 4 or 5 of us together to talk about what were the activities from camp that we could use because they fall into the packed category, and are there other new ones that we might want to incorporate into that rotation on that day. During our committee meeting, one of the 5th grade teachers actually did collect some data on, she had sent out to her 5th grade colleagues a list of all of the activities that we had at camp that were sort of on the approved list, and then said, how much do you like these? What was the interest of students 1 to 5? So we actually have all of that data that we'll use to show, these were 5, so let's look there first, and does it fall within the pact? So it will be sort of a mini camp rotation, but those particular activities haven't been selected yet.
So, for the other two, for Adventure In, Adventure Out, and Project Adventure, clearly we're working with companies. It sounds like outdoor activities is going to be back to, or will you be relying on parent volunteers as camp has in the past? Will that be mostly volunteers? Will any of the other days require volunteers?
I believe all days require volunteers.
Okay.
So there will be some. It won't be to the level of volunteers that we needed for camp, which was very difficult to get. But I would say it's similar to your typical field trip.
Okay.
In terms of number of volunteers.
Okay. 2 other quick questions. Does this new outdoor activities change the cost at all?
The original plan that we presented to you said between $80 and $85, and we're sticking to that. I actually had a slide on here, and then I said I shouldn't, because if it's 81 versus 84, and that depends on the material we'll need for the outdoor activity. So a little premature to define it, but it will be in that bracket.
And then my last question is, I know one of the concerns was that there have been past years where some classes have missed out on multiple days. And you did say when we got the first presentation that Adventure In, Adventure Out is willing to come in on a rain date. Is Project Adventure also willing to come in on a rain date? And then for the outdoor activities, will it be, what is being done to ensure that that day at EBC either gets made up or if there's some sort of indoor activity that the kids can do instead?
Yeah, so for the Adventure In and Adventure Out, yes, we have sort of a rain date pegged with them, not a particular date, but they will do a rain date the following week for whichever school missed it. Project Adventure can actually be done at the school. So we would probably just bring them in if weather conditions were such that we couldn't have it outside.
Okay.
And then we will have to work out the outdoor activities, just like during the camp week previously. If there was a day that we couldn't go, then there was no makeup. There was a shuffle so that some of the high priority activities were done by all in the shrunk week, the 4-day or 3-day week. But it is rain or shine. Obviously there are weather conditions that it would be unsafe, and that's when we would pull in. But otherwise, we're going to tell parents and students to get that raincoat and that rain hat and boots and dress accordingly.
You have a pretty good meteorologist who you consult.
Yeah, I know a guy.
Megan had a question.
Well, first I just wanted to say, as a parent of a 5th grader who brought my concerns to you in a sort of angry telephone call that first weekend about
I remember that one, Megan.
both the movie day and Bodeborg, I appreciate the willingness to go back and take a look and listen to the community concerns. So thank you for that. I did have a question because one of my thoughts at the time of a value of 5th grade camp that was potentially being lost was bringing the communities of students together. And I know that we talked a lot about that, and I had not realized that last year, of course I did not have a 5th grader, that did not happen, that they didn't commingle within their groups as much, that they stayed with their teacher. And I don't think many of us knew that. But given this new schedule at the week at a glance, so on any given day, there will be 2 schools at EBC utilizing different parts, I would guess, of EBC.
Right.
Will they be commingling for lunch at all, or having that opportunity? Because I do like in this schedule, as we know, the day school splits. So there are always a cohort that go to Stony, a cohort that go to Blanchard. In this schedule, it appears that every pairing of 2 schools happens on one of the days. Is there an opportunity for that to be a little bit of a social experience at any time?
Yes, our plan, and we actually mentioned this to Project Adventure as well, is to have a picnic lunch and coordinate lunch times in sort of that main open area. So, and to your point, just to clarify, so if you're the day school, on Monday, that's the orange, on Monday, you're at East Boston camps with Chrissa Foley, who has outdoor activities. And on Thursday, you're back at East Boston camps, and you have Abbott. So each school will be with the other school on
One
two
day.
of those
Yep.
days, or one of
Okay.
those 2 days.
So that seems like
So
a
that
good
will be
benefit that
right.
came out of this too.
Yes, thank you.
Could I just make one comment? First of all, thank you for establishing the committee, and thank you for the staff for their input, but also thank you for those community members who came in December and very passionately provided us with some input about fifth grade camp. I think this is a terrific compromise and a terrific plan going forward, and I think the kids are going to absolutely enjoy it immensely.
Other comments on fifth grade camp?
Just a thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
A lot of work went into that, thank you.
And thank you to the committee members who helped Carrie put it together. Because that wasn't a small task, getting that many people
That's right.
together.
That's
Teachers, parents.
Thank you to
Megan
fifth
and
grade
Janelle.
for their patience while it all got worked out. There was a lot of patience up for
Yes.
those fifth graders.
Okay, we'll move on to our 9:05 agenda item, and we're going to hear from Ingrid on our Q1, Q2 finances.
Sorry it's a little late. I think with all the budget stuff, we got pushed out a little bit, but,
We're only 10 minutes behind.
no, I meant that this is just,
Oh, I
first and second quarter.
It's like, what do you mean? I'm
Well,
only,
I can talk fast.
I'm only 10 minutes off my agenda.
So this is just a snapshot of our financial situation through December 31st, 2019, our first 2 quarters. Really, if you look on the second page, which I think I needed to do for my own self since this is my first year, is to see, how are we kind of compared to previous years. We're a little lower than 19 and 18 in the second, at the second quarter snapshot. Not kind of way out, but it's definitely lower. I think, as we've talked about ad nauseum, that, every year funding is tighter and tighter, and even though we receive increases every year, just the costs also go up as well. So we're doing more with less in the big picture. So this year, as probably is no surprise from all our budget hearings, is special education. We've talked a lot about the tuitions being higher. We're also seeing the pressure in the medical therapeutic contracted services line. We do a lot in-house to support our learners and do it gladly, but there is a cost. But as Bill, I know just over the many years that I've heard his presentations, has emphasized that, it is really not only cheaper to keep our students in-house, it's better for the students. And, so that is a line that, receives pressure, but in the long run, avoids potential outplacement costs. The transportation, special education transportation line is also much higher this year. We have more students, they're going further. The costs have gone up. That's why, I referenced earlier the study that's being done. We're really hoping, just in some of the preliminary findings, we are seeing, that our own vans are less expensive, and, would like to explore the costs of expanding that. Jennifer Piper, our new transportation coordinator, I can only sing her praises higher and higher. She really has done a great job recruiting, and so we're at full force again, which we haven't been for a long time. And she hates it when I say these things ahead because she thinks I'm going to jinx it. But we have people that really have, it's her reputation, have found out that she's working here now and want to come work for her, and are, pretty much if we get more vans, we would have drivers, it looks like. So we're eagerly looking at, looking forward to that analysis, and we'll hopefully have some recommendations to bring to you at future meetings. I just wanted to go, so, you know, this is an area, again, we talked about the 400,000 supplemental that really can help our budget this year, particularly in the tuition line. I did just want to, before we get too deep, go into, you know, that the tuition line changes constantly, and, you know, I could say, okay, we're gonna apply this amount of circuit breaker or that amount of circuit breaker, and that would obviously change the balance. So what I just, for consistency's sake, decided to do is I've basically applied all of 19's circuit breaker that we'd have to use, and then applied the amount that you approved in the 20 budget for using FY20 funds. So that's why when you look at the tuitions in a deficit of 142,000, that's where that number kind of comes from. Right now, we would need to spend more than the 700 and I should know it by heart number, $723,899 that we have budgeted. That number would be 800, as we saw in the previous presentation when we were talking about the supplemental, whereas that $400,000 supplemental will bring it down to 400 some. So I just wanted to clarify that it really depends how much circuit breaker we use. So I decided that just for consistency's sake, we would stick with the budgeted amount for this report, if that makes sense.
Appreciate, yep.
Yes. So obviously, some of our special education costs are areas that we're really looking closely, and we are also really keeping a very, very close eye to building maintenance. A lot of our costs are encumbered. We do encumber the entire salaries at the beginning of the year, so, you know, that, and for people at home maybe that don't understand that term, that means it's basically earmarked to be spent. So, you know, when we run a report, we see what we spent already, but then also we see the encumbered amount, which is the we are going to spend or anticipate to spend. So it's a very useful tool to know how much money you have left. Building maintenance is one area that there is less encumbering because it's more reactionary. So that's why that is, to me, on the finance side, a trickier one, and that we really want to keep a closer eye. I'm working very closely with Paul. We meet with him every week, and I really keep an eye on that line, and he's working very hard to really just do I mean, obviously not the bare minimum in the sense, but, you know, what we need to do for health and safety of our students and comfort, you know, for them to be available to learn. So those are, and then we are also going to start working with leadership beginning in April on putting together a schedule for prioritization for the summer work. So I'm just going to run through it quickly, and then you all can ask more questions than I need to speak. We instituted a spending freeze in January, so that right now is giving us a cushion in some of the more discretionary accounts. I just did want to explain school leadership building non-personnel expenses, which I referenced on page 2, the $82,202. So each school and the principal is given a certain funds over in each budget. As you know, it covers everything from paper, copiers, various, even some professional development that they have choice as the building budget manager to spend. So they are extremely frugal and really utilize their funds to the best and most appropriate. So there are some savings right now or balances in those funds. Hopefully, as we go towards the end of the year, if there are things that the schools need, and Bill feels that more comfortable that we can lift the spending freeze. But I have to say too, I think we're a little pause mid-year isn't bad.
Yeah, that, in all reality, that spending freeze will carry right through the end of the third fiscal quarter and probably a little bit into the fourth fiscal quarter.
Right now, we do have a slight balance in the teacher function 2305, which are the classroom teachers. As you know, staff in any organization is fluid, so we do realize some savings based on this budget was done over a year ago, people that retired or have moved on, and potentially that we've hired at a lower rate. Same teaching assistants right now have a balance, though after December 31st, we have hired a number of teaching assistants based on student need. Medical and therapeutic services referenced already. We are running a deficit in there of $128,000. Transportation, it's a large deficit. Altogether, it's $302,650. Most of that is due to the special education contracted out rates. Now that our in-house vans are fully utilized and we have enough drivers, Jen has reshuffled things, so we've been able to take over some of the more expensive routes. I know there was a period in the fall we had a very expensive route going into Boston, so now we have the capacity, so our drivers are running that route at a much lower rate. Also, at the beginning of the year, we did, D-Bus felt that we needed one more regular bus. So when this budget was developed, it was for 34 buses, and we're running 35 buses. So. I really think I've talked about tuitions enough over the last few months. It's just an unavoidable expense, and varies from year to year that we track very, very closely. Another area I did want to point out is telecommunications. I think you all know with the Safety and Security Task Force, there have been many upgrades, and then we've had just some failures. We've had a number of schools where the telephones have really just gone down, and we've had to make some fixes. The town technology department is really utilizing Westford Academy as the backup now for school town-wide technology, the servers and such. So we've had to have some upgrades there as well. Same building maintenance and security we're looking at very closely. There's some costs, the fire alarm and elevator inspections, unavoidable, and we just have to pay for them every year. And then I also, at the very end, included, I did expand from previous years the revolving and non-general fund balances. I did add the grants in and the donation accounts, just for a little more transparency, and that you can see what we receive and what we get. We have a very generous community. One thing that is not captured because they don't run through our accounts is the great support our PTOs give. A lot of that support is school by school and directly from the PTO to the school, so it doesn't flow through our bank accounts basically. So but I do want to really express our gratitude for all the support we receive, and the students and teachers absolutely benefit. So I know I just blasted through that, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that thoroughness.
Go ahead, I have a question, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of call out that I think going forward with the finance subcommittee that we're talking about forming, I think the very careful tracking that Courtney does of certain special education costs will be helpful for the committee to see. I do also want to raise again the caution of FERPA, which I did not make up. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And when Ingrid answers a question about an increasing cost, she's not being cagey when she doesn't give details. There's specific laws that protect the privacy of all students. So while we can discuss generalities, we can't lay out specifics that would identify any student for any reason whatsoever, special education or otherwise. I do think that will be that Courtney's tracking will be very helpful for us, but I do want the public to understand that will not involve specifically IDing certain students for certain reasons. So
That's very important.
Yep.
Very important.
No, thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. FERPA is not a made-up word.
No, it's not.
Megan, did you have questions, or can I ask mine?
Go ahead, I'm still reading.
So I have a quick question on heating of buildings.
Yes.
You have encumbrances. Is that because we pay like a flat rate throughout the year?
No, we actually have a very complicated.
I know it's extremely complicated, and I also realize that
tracking.
February has been a fairly warm month, so do we anticipate any kind of savings?
Well, I'd love to say yes.
I'm sure.
But you have to keep in mind that the bills also track about 2 months behind. So, so the end of December, we had just probably paid November, the middle of November bill. So I actually looked at that because I too was going, oh, good, here's an area that we might realize some savings.
We might realize, yeah.
So I looked at last year's, and we really paid, even the May bill was fairly high. February, March, April are the highest heating bills.
Really? Okay.
Well, because those are the ones in the, that hit the cold spell. And we always seem to have a cold spell in April. Maybe this year we won't. But
and so the encumbrances in the building, is that just sort of an average of what we spend every month?
Sorry, which line?
The encumbrances of the heating.
Oh, yes.
4120. So I see what we budgeted, and then what we spent.
Right. So yes. So we do look at what we.
Like, how do you estimate? Is that an estimate then? Your
It
encumbrance?
is an estimate, yes.
We look at our
hopefully-
actuals.
Right. We look at our actuals. So in order to encumber, we generate a purchase order, and then every payment draw off that purchase order. So say for National Grid, so we have a purchase order for X amount at the Miller School, and then we track it every month.
Okay.
Every time we pay, and then tweak it, towards the end of, starting in April or May, we see how much is left of that purchase order, and then we know, oh, okay, maybe we overestimated or we underestimated, we need to add to this purchase order. So we
I just was trying to figure out how you had an encumbrance, and that was like, that's got to be shooting darts.
And it is sometimes.
Yeah, the important thing is, in terms of fiscal management, is making sure that we have encumbered our funds for our labor contracts, but also for those fixed costs such as utilities and heat, those being budgeted based on historical trends, which sometimes happens in other school systems. If they don't encumber those monies, they're going through peak heating season months, thinking that they have another $400,000 or $500,000 in balance, when they really don't. You have to encumber those monies and back out the encumbrance after you're pretty sure of all the liquidations.
Right. Okay.
And we look at a 3-year trend, so
Right. That's right.
it's not just last year. We try, but it's the weather, so.
It's like the snow and ice budget.
Exactly.
Did you have another one?
Nope, that was, you covered it.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, may I just,
Sure, Christina had a question. Can we, can
sure.
Christina ask?
Christina Green.
Yes.
Or them?
Probably to you.
Okay.
So, in the revolving fund accounts,
Oh.
the One to World Tech user fee,
Yes.
what is that being spent on now?
That's for replacement Chromebooks right now?
But I thought that the high school switched over to an outside vendor for insurance. So
And not everyone buys the insurance, so that's allowing. I actually asked Gail Anselmetti about that, and then they buy a certain amount kind of as just reserve. There's some that just get so trashed they don't. Not everyone buys insurance, and we just need a certain amount that for backup.
But I guess I thought that if you didn't buy the insurance, then you were on the hook for it.
Right.
Right.
I can get more information.
Just because it's $15,000
Right,
this
right.
year.
Yeah, it's not small.
As long as we can prove, negligence, in terms of, someone taking their laptop to the beach and putting it.
No, there's no
that type of
negligence.
thing, so.
I'm happy to get more information.
Okay, yeah, I'm just,
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard to keep everything.
I hear you. Nope, I get it. Okay, so
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
just get back
Nope.
to me.
I
Thank
will
you.
absolutely, and I'll send it to the entire finance committee and the school committee.
Just a
Other-
quick notice
Yes?
before we go on to warrants. I had a good meeting with representatives of the League of Women Voters today. Jim Antonelli, representing the high school and the community service team, and also one of our staff members from this building. We are going to be offering daycare in this building, in this room, and next door, in the adjacent room during town meeting.
Wow.
And we're in the process of putting that together as a service to the community. We will have a registration form that will be sent out within the next couple of weeks. And we had a very good meeting, and looking forward to making sure we have maximum participation at town meeting, and for those parents in particular who have children. What we're going to do is target it for kindergarten through grade 5 children. We just simply can't get involved with trying to address children who are not properly toilet trained at this point in time. So it'll be for K to 5. Much more will be coming out. I'm going to put something out to the principals this Friday that they will put out in their Friday bulletin. But we're excited that we're being able to do that again this year.
Great.
That's fantastic.
Are we ready for warrants?
Personnel update?
That says it's after warrants.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve payroll warrant number 2035 SP dated February 27th, 2020 in the amount of $2,039,679.46.
Second?
All in favor? Unanimous.
Motion to approve expense warrant number 2035 SE dated February 27th, 2020 in the amount of $515,823.96.
Second?
All in favor? It's unanimous. And now, personnel update. Do you have?
Yes,
there's
I
a couple
do.
remarkables.
Yep. First of all, I want to thank longtime Special Education Department Secretary Dottie Wagner. Dottie started here in 1986, just a couple of months before I did, and has just provided absolutely outstanding service to our school system, to the students and staff and the parents. I want to also thank Andrea Gardner. Regrettably, Andrea is going to be resigning at the end of the year to seek a position in other school systems that is more consistent with her areas of expertise, being in technology. So we're going to miss her greatly. And also, our teacher assistants are some of the unsung heroes in the school system. And Donna Burkett has been with us for about 14, 15 years now, and she is going to be retiring also. So we thank her for her terrific contributions also. 3 outstanding people who will miss greatly at the end of the school year.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Can I have another motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
9:43. Very good.